see that it's recording, and then you got.
Any questions while I'm standing here? Yes, sir.
I was just curious if you knew what your father's favorite role was.
You know, people have told me a lot of different things. But there was a movie called The Eve of St. Mark, which is really, really hard to find. I don't even think they showed it on TCM, and that might have been at least one of his favorite roles. Champagne for Caesar, he loved the part in that movie. I think probably in the horror movies, I've heard of the Poe movies, his favorite was Tomb of Lygia. And of the horror movies, maybe Edward Lionheart in Theater of Blood. So that would be my overall answer for you. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a comment. Your father came to our university, University in Kentucky.
Oh, cool.
And I really enjoyed his speech. It was called the Golden Speech.
That was a great one, wasn't it? Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful talk. You know, part of it's available on YouTube, but not all of it. Yeah, like the first maybe 20 minutes.
Okay.
But I wish more of it. Yeah. I just wrote a blog that I called The Villain Still Pursuing. So, yeah. It was a good talk. It was, for those of you who don't know what it was about, he sort of wrote about the role of the villains in drama and then, you know, how he got to play all these really cool villains and why it was way more fun to play a villain than a good guy.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions while we're waiting on the sound? Are we waiting on the sound? Does anyone know?
Yes, I believe he was there.
Is there somebody after me, by the way?
Yes, but they start 15 minutes.
Okay.
I think it's 7:15.
So, sorry, you guys. Where was your father from? He was born in St. Louis. So, and people always think he's from England, so they call him the Englishman from St. Louis. And he married a lot of British women. So he definitely was an Anglophile, had a thing for all things English. So, especially women.
What was his least favorite role?
Good question. Least favorite role. Well, I think the movie, he was really proud to have been in this movie because it's one of the worst movies ever made. I talk about it in this. But it was probably one of the least favorite things he did. It was a movie called Green Hell, which was a James Whale movie, but really bad movie. Really bad. The sound? Yeah, please. He was 24. Yeah. He always wanted to act, but didn't get cast. So, yeah. Do you want to just try it? Let's try the first audio and then let's give it a whirl, because this is what I usually start with. And let me make sure the mute is off. Okay? Let's give it a whirl. See if.
This is Vincent Price. Michael Jackson is the Thriller. Can you dig it?
Okay, so could anybody actually listen to that without smiling?
No.
So the feeling that I think we all get when we hear my dad laugh, and just the fun in that can you dig it, you know? That really is what my whole talk is about. Everybody always says, what was it like growing up as the daughter of Vincent Price? And you know, kind of asking like, what was it like growing up as the kid of a famous person? My dad, when he walked into a room, it was literally like the ceiling blew off, the sunshine came in, and everybody's life was lit up. Everybody felt that way. I think about his movies too. And so he had this incredible love of life and this incredible capacity to be just in life. And so, you know, I never really thought or understood that he was famous because he was an actor, he did movies. I just thought people responded to him because of that quality in him. So, of course, we all know him as the master of menace, right? But he went through life loving life. So I was daddy's girl, for sure. He was an awesome dad. You know, people always say, what was he like? I say, I'm gonna take my shoes off. It was incredible to be his kid. Now, was he perfect? He was a workaholic. In fact, we dropped him off so often at the airport that I actually thought he worked there. I didn't know that was where he went to go someplace else. He just was, as a dad, somebody who made me believe that every day could be an adventure, every day could be fun. I love this picture. Here he is in our pool, you know, just like some random day in the pool, having fun. I don't know if you can see this. I don't know if these lights go down. Did they actually dim? You know, just the way he made me feel joy. Everything was fun. This is the beach where I had the incredible good fortune to grow up on. And he made me laugh. He made everybody laugh. And I just feel like I was so fortunate in that regard. Now, as I said, was he perfect? No. In 1973, he made a movie called Theater of Blood, which many of you love, and in it, he kills off all the critics, every actor's dream, right? The female critic who he killed off became my future stepmother. And he was married to my mom at the time, and we lived around the corner from her in London. So I would be less than honest if I didn't admit that sometimes I wish that this electrocution scene hadn't happened in real life. She called herself my wicked stepmother, which is never a good thing, right? But I forgave my stepmother almost right away because she made my dad feel like this, pure joy. And if there's one word that I think describes my dad more than anything, it is joy. You know, I think as we get older, all of us, we have a choice. We can expand into loving life and be more present in life, or we can contract into fear. My dad, as he got older, just expanded into life. He made a documentary film about roller coasters, as he called them, when he was in his 70s. He did Michael Jackson's Thriller when he was in his 70s. But mother contracted. She became more and more fearful. So, you know, even she, in a funny way, understood why he married a woman as alive as my wicked stepmother. And so, you know, I look at my life and I think, what is the legacy that you have growing up, the kid of anybody, right? What is the legacy of the family that you've grown up in? Now, I had kind of a weird family. They didn't believe in inheritance per se. They came from that era in Hollywood where you would not recommend your own child to sweep the stage. My dad's agent didn't even know he had a kid. You know, it was all about you make it on your own kid. And so, at first I took legacy, the idea of legacy really literally, like, what is my legacy? And then what I realized was my legacy is what he taught me about joy. I love this definition of joy, the pure and simple delight in being alive. And that's how my dad went through his life. This is him as a young man in Malibu. You can just see that smile on his face. This is him at a typical dinner party at our house. I don't know what they're wearing. It was maybe caftan night, I don't know. But, you know, this is him with one of his best friends, Barbara Poe, just having fun. And this is typical. On the job, always finding a way to have fun. This is such a great shot, isn't it? With Boris and Basil Rathbone and Peter Lorre, and they are having a blast. Lunch break, I think this shot was called. And of course, when it came to art, which was his great passion, just being able to be around art brought him joy. And his dogs. He loved pets. He loved his dogs. He wrote a wonderful book called The Book of Joe, and we're going to bring it out early next year. It's just a really sweet book. So that's Joe, his beloved dog Joe, and these are his two skipper keys at the end of his life. So he was somebody who just thought, oh my gosh, every day I have so much to be grateful for. So this idea of legacy, right? Okay, it can be a gift, you know, something, a bequest, anything handed down to us from the past. What was handed down to me was joy. Now, at the end of my dad's life, my stepmother passed away before my dad. And I was grateful for that fact because she really split my family apart. She and I actually had a sort of a love-hate relationship. I loved her and she mostly hated me, but she was just one of those women who was very fearful and afraid. But she and I actually got along, but she was horrible to my brother and cut his kids out of my dad's life. So, you know, it was not a good situation. And when I got the chance at the end of my dad's life to spend time with him, I had this hope that we would be able to go back to this time. But you can't go back, you know? And I realized that it was a little unfair of me. So whenever I begin my talks at horror conventions, I say to you guys, I have a true confession. My true confession is, I'm not a fan of horror movies. They scare me. I'm going to show you the visual proof of my childhood trauma and you will forgive me. I promise. But what I am is I'm a fan of you guys. I'm a fan of horror fans for a couple of reasons. One is you have kept my dad's legacy alive. There were people who were so much more famous than my dad when he was alive. People like Robert Taylor or Ava Gardner. You know, Ava Gardner's primarily known as a, you know, 3-letter answer in the New York Times crossword puzzle. Robert Taylor, people have hardly heard of. But my dad, you know, we started his Facebook page, I think, 20 months ago. We're at 107,000 likes. You guys have kept my dad alive. And you guys have kept his spirit alive. And honestly, I am grateful. But the other thing is I'm personally grateful to you. Because in coming and talking to you and hearing how much you love my dad and what he meant to you and what he brought to your lives, I get to be with my dad in the way I'd hoped to be with him at the end of his life. Now, we had an amazing time at the end of his life. We sat on his bed and talked 3 afternoons a week about art, about life. I taped him. We went to museums together. We had an amazing time. But what I get to do now in hearing your stories and sharing what he meant to me is I get to be that little girl with him again. I get to have that joy in having really, honestly, the most awesome dad on the planet. So I said, you know, you get this choice of expanding and contracting. Here's my mom, right? You know, they're at the same occasion. My mother looks like stricken, and my dad is completely full of joy. So I get to choose which of those legacies, because they were both workaholics. I'm a workaholic. But I get to choose a different legacy. I put this poem up here. It's the first stanza of a poem by E.E. Cummings. And it was something my dad spoke at the end of the graduation speech he gave at my high school. And honestly, when I heard him say it, I kind of thought, what the hell is he talking about? I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirit of trees, and a blue, true dream of sky, for everything which is infinite, which is natural, which is yes. And I remember thinking, okay, why is he talking about God? And he was kind of a seen one tree, seen them all kind of guy. Why this? It took me till I got older to understand that he was giving us all his philosophy of life. And it comes down to one word: yes. If every morning we can wake up and say yes to life. And you know, I come to these horror conventions and I see all of you guys here because you love being here. And the joy that you have in coming to be with your tribe, the joy that I feel when you tell me your stories about my dad, the way that you embrace me and make me feel so at home here, even though I'm not a horror fan, that's the kind of philosophy of yes that my dad advocated. You know, this is a picture of my dad and my brother and me. And I have to remember to be that little girl, that joy-filled little girl. And when I come to these horror conventions, you make me feel by connecting with my dad like I'm that little girl. So I learned some amazing things from my dad. He said, when you limit your interests, you limit your life. That's a pretty amazing yes-based way to live. Everything we did was an adventure, whether we were walking on the beach looking for moonstone or driftwood, whether we were in our milk truck with an RV in front of Mount Rushmore. He said if you are always curious, you will never be bored. He thought boredom was pretty much the 8th deadly sin. The world is so interesting, he thought. How could you possibly have an excuse to be bored? I was going through the family photo album about a year ago, and I noticed there were all these pictures of my dad and me looking at rocks. And I'm like, what the hell are we looking at rocks for? It's not like any of us really loved rocks. And what I realized is my dad was teaching me that wherever you are, there's something interesting. So whether we were looking at rocks, this is, I think, the Painted Desert in Arizona, this is some beach somewhere, we were always finding that there was something interesting wherever we went. So I'm a poetry fan. I'm a poetry fan because of my dad. He used to pay me $1 for every poem I would memorize and recite to him. So I was a pretty mercenary little kid. I wanted that dollar. I learned a lot about poetry. He knew what he was talking about because in the process I fell in love with it. And one of my favorite poets is a poet named Mary Oliver. And she gives these instructions for living life. Pay attention. Be astonished and tell about it. And when I read that, I thought, that's what my dad taught me. I found this picture of him. Somebody had given him this butterfly in like a little plexiglass box for Christmas. Most people would have just gone, oh, thank you, that's so cool. Look at him. He's put it up on the mantle and he's looking at it, looking at the iridescence of its wings, enjoying it. You can see his enthusiasm for it. That was pay attention. Be astonished. This is my dad with the artist Andrew Wyeth, who in his heyday was one of the most famous artists in the world. And my dad was equally as famous as Andrew Wyeth, but he didn't think of himself that way. He thought of himself as a fan, and his excitement at getting to meet interesting people. He never became jaded. And finally, tell about it. He lectured on the things that interested him, on things that would inspire people. 60 cities in 65 days, every year for 30 years, on villainy, on art, on saying yes to being alive. So pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. I started writing this blog called The Daily Practice of Joy because it was my way of combating part of my parents' legacy, my workaholism, with really what I felt like they wanted me to do was learn how to say yes to life and be alive to joy. And so this talk is really a talk about my dad's life and sharing with you how he found joy in every single day. And I start with this picture of my dad and me because it'll tell you a little bit about him. So everybody always thought Vincent Price, this awesome dresser, you know, he's always so chic in the movies with his ascots and smoking jackets. He was like a slob. He would take the Brooks Brothers shirt that was rumpled in the laundry pile, put that on, that's pretty much that. What is around his neck? Like a bathrobe tie? Like, what is that? You know, it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to an occasion, and he grabbed something and threw it around his neck. But the real reason that I show this picture, because it makes me giggle every single time, is that my dad was all about food. And today, we're celebrating that. It's the 50th anniversary launch of this very, very famous cookbook my parents wrote. 8th most popular out-of-print book of any kind. Madonna's Sex is #1. This book is #8. And the 50th anniversary edition just came out today. It's here. We're very excited. My dad wrote that cookbook because he loved to eat. And he loved the adventure of finding food. And as visual proof of that, I want you to note what's in this pocket. Not 1, but 2 plastic forks, so that he wouldn't miss any opportunity to nosh on something delicious wherever he was. So my dad grew up the son of 2 Vincent Prices, the son and grandson. His grandfather was named Vincent Price, and he was a household name in the United States. Invented baking powder, wrote cookbooks, first person to patent breakfast cereals, extracts of vanilla. And when he died, the Chicago Tribune called him one of the housewives' best friends. His youngest son, also Vincent Price, became the head of the largest candy company in the United States. And this is him when he was in high school. And I love showing this picture of my grandfather, who I never met, who was apparently the nicest man on the planet. Because it's kind of a cool picture of not one, but two Hollywood connections. So this is my grandfather doing this little magic act. And one of his cohorts here is the father of another Hollywood legend. That is Richard Wells, the father of Orson Welles. So my dad was the youngest of 4 kids, grew up in St. Louis. And right from the beginning, my dad felt different than his siblings. Much younger than his siblings. They were all dark-haired. He was blonde. They loved music. They were this musical family. My dad sang well enough, but he fell in love with art. He found this book about art, and he wanted to be an artist. He loved looking at art. And when he was 12 years old, he walked by a shop in St. Louis where they had some Rembrandt etchings. And he fell in love with one in the window. And he walked in, and he said to the guy, "How much is that?" The guy said, $37.50. And I will bless that man to this day because he and my dad at 12 years old worked out a 3-year payment plan. And every penny of my dad's allowance till he was 15 went to buying that Rembrandt. And when he was 15 years old, he took possession of his first piece of art of Rembrandt, and he felt like he had arrived. In many other ways, he was a normal Midwestern boy, upper middle class boy, but he had one secret ambition. He wanted to be an actor. And the very first play he did was Robin Hood, and that's my dad right there playing Robin Hood in the play. The problem was he really never acted again. He never got cast in anything. He always wanted to get cast, and he didn't. And so he kind of just put all his energy into doing normal kid stuff. People always say, "Tell me something I won't know about Vincent Price." So one thing you probably don't know about Vincent Price is one of his great passions was deep sea fishing. He loved deep sea fishing. And he was never happier than when he was on or near the ocean. But he put his passion for acting into making home movies. Now, I would like to say that that was the only reason he made the movies, because he wanted to be an actor, but somebody gave me a clip from one of these home movies last year. And when I realized, as I looked at them and some of the other clips, was that really why my dad wanted to make these home movies is that all the plot lines had a lot of rescues. He rescued damsels in distress. He rescued women tied up on railroad tracks. And almost all of them, it gave him an excuse to give them mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So I have this little clip, and I'm going to show you this clip of my dad. There's no sound to it, but you can see him rescuing the damsel in distress. So hopefully this will work. He's probably about 19 or 20, incredibly handsome, as I think you can see. Some of these are just home movies with their dog. And this is, they had a summer home up in Ontario. So that's the summer home. I don't know who he is. Maybe my uncle. Okay, here we go. The damsel in distress. So he has to fix her hair. I love that. And he hugs her because he's going to bid her adieu while he goes to help her. And in his tattered clothing, he staggers off to find driftwood, which he brings back to her. And he falls to his knees and builds a fire and wakes her up to show her that he's built this fire. And then, because he's been the hero, there you go, the coup de grace, the moment that he's been waiting for, and all of them are like this. It's hilarious. These other ones that he does when he's in college, and he's, you know, the girl's tied to the railroad tracks, but of course, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, because that's what you need when you're on railroad tracks. He always had a flair for the dramatic. I love this picture of him with the beaver coat and the bowler hat from the late 20s. So his father went to Yale, his brother went to Yale, my dad went to Yale. And in many ways he had a typical college career, but he wanted to act. Didn't get cast in anything from the famous Yale School of Drama, but he did sing in the Glee Club. And when he was at Yale, he made a friend. And he was the most famous person my dad had ever met. He was a man named James Thurber, who was the famous American essayist and cartoonist. And Thurber drew this incredible piece for my dad's 22nd birthday. It's just a wonderful cartoon. That's my dad, youth. There's Thurber and his wife, my dad's dog. Of course, it's during Prohibition, so there's a lot of gin and beer. And what I think is amazing for 1933, here's Hitler up here, which is a pretty wild thing. Anyway, my dad decided that Thurber was the most famous person he knew, so he would tell him about his ambition to become an actor. And Thurber laughed at him. Thurber said, "Oh my God, are you kidding? I mean, you haven't even been in any plays. Don't do that. You know, that's way too ambitious." So my dad believed him, and he decided to go on and study art history. But what I will tell you is that my dad had the last laugh, because in a New Yorker magazine from the mid-40s, Thurber wrote an essay about giving young people advice. And in it, he said, "Ever since I told Vincent Price not to become an actor, I never give young people advice." So my dad graduates from Yale, and he goes on to London to study art history. And there he is in London, the youngest thief. But he's in London, the greatest theater town in the world. So he goes to every play he can go to, and he sees John Gielgud's famous production of Hamlet 8 different times. And finally, his friends are like, "Try out for a play. I mean, you love the theater." So he tries out for this American play called Chicago, and he gets a walk-on part, basically 3 lines. He said, "I got the part because I could walk and chew gum at the same time." You know, he walks across stage chewing gum, that's it. But he has been bitten by the acting bug. So he goes to get headshots taken. And he's a, grad student in art history. So he does a trade with the guy. The guy says, "I'll shoot a couple shots for my portfolio, I'll shoot your headshots." Well, my dad learned never to do that again, because one of the shots that the guy shot for his portfolio appeared, this was it, life-size over Piccadilly Circus advertising deodorant soap. But what a handsome shot, right? So my dad tries out for the next play at this same theater, and it's a play about Victoria Regina. And he tries out for the part of Prince Albert, and he gets it. And all of a sudden, my dad is catapulted into stardom. This becomes the hit play of London. He is named Male Newcomer of the Year in the British Theatre, and the female Newcomer of the Year that year is Vivian Leigh. And so an American producer comes over, buys the play as a vehicle for his big star, Helen Hayes, who is the first lady of the American theater. And my dad ends up in New York as a matinee idol, the star of the biggest hit on Broadway in Victoria Regina, opposite Helen Hayes. And there he is. And so all of a sudden, from being this grad student in art history, having had no experience, my dad is a star. And Hollywood comes calling. This is the middle of the Depression. They offer him $1 million movie contract. 1935, $1 million. To my dad's credit, he always had a lot of humility. So he goes to Helen Hayes and he says, "What should I do?" And Helen Hayes asks him one simple question. She says, "Do you think you know your craft?" And my dad thought about it. He said, "No, how would I know my craft? I've been in like 1.5 plays." She said, "Exactly. If you want to have a long career and not be a flash in the pan, you say no and learn your craft." So my dad turned down $1 million movie contract. And in those days, Broadway would close in the summers, and people would do summer stock all over the East Coast. So for 2 years, he was in Victoria Regina, and he performed in 8, 9, 10 different plays with some of the great actresses and actors. This is the incredible Chinese-American actress Anna May Wong that my dad was in a play with. This is Lorette Taylor and her comeback. He got to work with these amazing people. And so when Hollywood finally came calling again, he felt like he knew his craft and he could say yes. So he goes out to Hollywood under contract to Universal. He's super excited. And they cast him in a movie as a leading man. And it's sort of a screwball comedy, and they're sort of making him kind of a Robert Taylor. He's handsome, he's 6'4", and they cast him in this part, and he hates it. He hates being a leading man. He wants to be an actor's actor, and actors to his mind were character actors. People like Jimmy Cagney and Spencer Tracy and Edward G. Robinson, who was one of his good friends. But if you think about what they look like, right, and you look at that, you can see why Hollywood wasn't going to cast him as a character actor. So he's in this movie that he thinks is horrible, and he wants to act. So he goes back to Broadway, and he joins Orson Welles' Mercury Theater. And what Orson Welles was doing was these really avant-garde, modern-day dress productions of classics. So he signs a contract for $100 a week to play these roles. And he sinks his teeth in. He meets some incredible actors, and he really becomes an actor's actor. He also falls in love with a woman in the cast, a woman named Edith Barrett, and they marry right during that production. So the two of them go back to Hollywood together, and my dad tries to get more juicy roles. He's cast in period pieces. This is with Betty Davis and The Private Lives of Elizabeth Essex and Errol Flynn. He's cast, they don't know what to do with him. This is him and Joseph Smith in the Brigham Young story. And of course, Tower of London, his first horror film with two people who would become dear friends for life, Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff. And I love what happens on this movie because, we hear a lot about rookie hazing in sports. Well, it happens in Hollywood. My dad's character is supposed to be drowned in a vat of Malmsey, which is like a big cask of like wine. So Basil and Boris knew this, and what they decided to do was tell all the crew and all the cast to dump all their cigarette butts, all their dregs of their coffee, all their old Coke into this vat of Malmsey. And they dumped my dad in there and hold him down just a little too long. Of course, this will tell you what kind of guy my dad was like. He thought it was hilarious, and they became lifelong friends. So this is my dad in that picture. And this was the time where he was also in this horrible movie, Green Hell. And because we started a little late, I'm not going to show you the clip, but it's on YouTube. It was such a bad movie, really, truly one of the worst movies, that when the actors who were in it got killed off, because they all got killed off, they were like, thank God. It's hilarious. I'll show you. This is a little bit of
What's the thermometer say, Richardson? 130. Boy, it's hot. Hot roasting.
In the swamps, it gets as high as 140.
I thought they never roasted a man till after he was dead.
That's why they call it the Green Hell.
Strange guy, Richardson. He always keeps to himself. You know anything about him?
Nothing. Well, the best thing to know about any man's affairs.
As they say, it does look now that there's something moving over there.
Them there alligators sure do look hungry.
Well, don't fall intakes. You might poison them. That'd be tragic.
This is my favorite part.
How mysterious the jungle is at night. The more you see of it, the less you know about it. Sounds incredibly lonely, doesn't it? I wonder why there's so many lonely people in such a crowded world.
Greg,
Do you think a man can love two women at the same time, in his heart be faithful to each, and yet want to be free?
What do you want, an answer or a justification?
I hope that screenwriter never worked again. It's unbelievable. My dad just thought that movie was really, honestly, the worst movie he was ever in, and was very proud of it. It was like, for a long time, one of the 10 worst movies of all time. He thought, he would say, how many actors can say they're in one of the 10 worst movies of all time? My dad never said no to an autograph, never didn't talk to anyone. He always was present. He loved people. And I think part of the reason is because he was a fan himself. He came to Hollywood. This is a picture of my dad and his wife Edith with Joan Crawford. And, he just was like, oh my gosh, Joan Crawford invited me to dinner. And, he never was jaded for his whole life. He just was in awe and astonishment at the good fortune of his life. I also want to point out here, because it's going to be relevant later, and you might not notice it, I want to pay particular attention to Joan Crawford's shoulder pads, because those are some pretty awesome shoulder pads in it. Let's circle back around it. This is my dad with Tallulah Bankhead, and it's one of my favorite pictures of him because it looks like he is literally about to lose it. He's laughing so hard. He just got a kick out of being with all these amazing, amazing people. So 1940, he becomes a dad for the first time. His son, Vincent Price, is born in Los Angeles. But he doesn't stay in Los Angeles for very long because his career really hasn't taken off in the movies the way he wanted it to. So he goes back to Broadway, and he gets cast in a play called Angel Street. And in it, he plays a villain, a man who tries to make his wife believe that she's gone crazy, but really he's just trying to get rid of her by getting her locked up in an institution. It's pretty tricky. And he said when he got on stage for the first time and he felt how much the audience hated him, he knew he had come home. He's like, villains, that's what I'm meant to play. So he gets under contract by 20th Century Fox, and he starts playing these meteor roles, these great villains. This is the wonderful movie, The Song of Bernadette, show with Jennifer Jones. This is, I think, one of the movies of which he was proudest, Dragonwick, with the incredible Gene Tierney, and in which he starts a pattern that'll follow him through a lot of his movies, murdering off his wives, which is always a good thing. And I love this picture because some of you who are movie buffs may not recognize her, but that's a very young Jessica Tandy, which is pretty cool. And Laura, what an incredible movie! Laura, that Otto Preminger directed. My dad was so proud to be in that movie, and I love Laura in particular because it's a kind of role my dad didn't play very often, and for me it's a glimpse of more sort of what my dad could have been if he'd sort of remained in the South and been sort of that Southern gentleman that in a way he was brought up to be. So, but he's sort of weakly evil. I love him in this part. So, the mid-1940s are an era of a lot of beginnings and endings. His contract with Fox ends. His parents celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, and within 2 years, both of them have passed away. He ends up getting a divorce, and he finds himself living alone with his beloved dog, Joe. The good news is he gets to spend one-on-one time with my brother and